Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me once again for Story Time with Joyce. And we are reading from my book, Betty, which is the first book in my Big City Dreams series. Now, last week we read where Betty was working at City Hall as part of a cleaning crew, and there was a fire that broke out, and she had to be helped down through a ladder, and it was very scary for her. She quit that job, and she started working at an amusement park taking tickets. And she only gets to work several months of the year, and then the park is closed. So we left last week with Serena, her best friend, and her having tea. And Serena was telling her that this hospital, the psychiatric hospital, was offering a program where they were looking for people to come in and be foster grandmothers and work with some of the children who have had problems based on trauma. And Betty was feeling like she didn't really have much to offer. But Serena kept talking about it, and finally, I think Betty might have acquiesced and applied. But let's go see. Okay, this chapter is called Louie. All right. Serena smiled, for she knew Betty's gifts were just hidden. Due to Betty's low self-esteem, Arvin's controlling issues and cheating ways certainly attributed to this, along with John using her as a housemaid. Then, of course, John's family putting her out of the house and not even acknowledging her as family, even though she and John were married for many years. Serena did take Betty over to the hospital, and Betty filled out the application, and she was actually asked to stay for an interview. A man walked out of the office and came over to Betty and said, "Mrs. Payson, my name is Mr. Roberts. Thank you for applying to our foster grandmother program. By looking at your application, I can see you have watched a lot of children over the course of these many years." "Yes, sir. I have 2 of my own, 2 girls and 2 grandchildren, a boy and a girl," Betty responded. "Why do you want to be part of this project?" Mr. Roberts asked. "My friend thought I would be able to do some good with one of the children. She has more faith in me than I have in myself. I have the time, so I thought I would give it a try, if you think I am qualified enough." "Mrs. Payson, to tell you the truth, we really do need help. We have children who have been placed here who in some cases have no real family and have had some severe trauma in their lives. For example, we have one boy, Louie, who hasn't uttered a word in 2 years. He came to us in that state after his parents were murdered. The authorities believed him to be retarded or mentally ill. However, we don't believe he is mentally ill or retarded. We think he has just been so traumatized that he has himself locked up inside. Louie has had several foster grandmothers, none who have been able to get through to the boy. If you're willing to take him on, you can start any time." Betty gasped and said, "Oh my, so fast? I didn't think I would be approved so quick. I don't even know if I can do any good. Louie needs someone to work with him who he can trust. I think your friend is right. I can see something in you that possibly could unlock him. You are soft, yet I can tell you can be firm when necessary, and I think you might just have the kind of heart that we need in our program. I don't want to see Louie get lost in the system, and if we can't see some improvement with him soon, that's exactly what's going to happen. The state will institutionalize him. We don't want to see that happen. Are you willing to try, Betty?" Mr. Roberts asked. Betty felt herself acquiescing. "Yes, I will try. I just hope I can do some good so I don't disappoint you." Mr. Roberts responded quickly, "Betty, I don't think you could disappoint anyone. No matter how things turn out, I will have known that you gave it your all. We would need you every day for a couple of hours, and it is voluntary. Is that okay with you?" "Yes, however, I don't drive, so I will need to take a bus," Betty said. "That's not a problem. You will be given tokens for the bus." Betty and Mr. Roberts continued to work out all the details, and when Betty told Serena the conversation on the way home, Serena just smiled. She knew this was going to change Betty's life. Betty agreed to work with Louie as a foster grandmother. She was a little nervous, for this was pushing her out of her comfort zone. She used to watch children, not work with them in any constructive way. She was too busy cleaning and cooking for them. Also, she was in no position to teach them anything. She actually learned from them. Over the years, she did learn to speak more articulately and pronounce the INGs, the ings, on her words. She tried to stop joining two words together, however, she still did sometimes. The next day, Betty took a bus to the hospital, took a deep breath, and walked in. She was greeted by Mr. Roberts, who was standing with a little boy who appeared to be around 8 years old. "Come in, Betty. Come meet Louie," Mr. Roberts said. He turned to Louie and continued, "Louie, this is Mrs. Payson. She is going to be spending time with you." "Nice to meet you, Louie. Would you like to take a walk for a little while?" Betty asked, and Louie nodded. Betty and Louie walked in silence for a while. Then Betty said, "Louie, let's walk over by that bench. We can sit for a while and just enjoy the flowers. They are so pretty. I love flowers, don't you?" Louie smiled and nodded. Betty continued, "The flowers that we are looking at are called mums." Sounds like moms, doesn't it? Louie just listened. Mums come in oh so many colors. Most flowers bloom in the spring and summer. Mums are some of the flowers that bloom in the fall. This month is October, and it is considered the fall. Oh, you probably already knew that. You know, where I was born and grew up, there were lots of trees. I grew up in Kentucky, which is a couple of states from here. I lived in a small cabin with many brothers and sisters. Our cabin was surrounded by lots and lots of beautiful red maple trees. All their leaves would turn red, and sometimes orange. When I was little, my mom told me that I called them flower trees, red flower trees. If you look way over there, you can see some of those trees. You can tell by those beautiful red leaves, or as I used to call them, red flower trees. "Do you see them?" Betty asked. Louie nodded his head. Betty then asked another question. "Louie, am I talking too much?" Louie shook his head no. "Do you want me to keep talking?" Betty asked. Louie smiled. "Okay then, here comes another question. Do you like pancakes?" Louie smiled. "Do you put syrup on your pancakes?" And Louie nodded. Betty went on, "Maple syrup comes from those red maple trees. In the spring, my dad would drill a hole in the trunk of the tree and syrup would come out. My mom would heat it up and then do some other things to it. Not sure all what she did. All I know is that I put it on my pancakes and it was sure good. Louie, my time is up with you. We need to go back inside." Louie nodded, although he did look a little sad. Betty took the bus back to her flat, made herself something to eat, and just reflected on her time with Louie. She had really enjoyed sitting with Louie and was surprised at how open he was to listening to her. Betty had not thought of her childhood on the farm in Kentucky for so long that it felt good to revisit it through the stories she had told Louie. That night she went to bed with a smile on her face for the first time in many, many years. The next morning she got up feeling happier than usual. Betty tried to keep herself busy so she wouldn't keep looking at the clock until it was time to leave to go see Louie. She was surprised how she felt toward that little 8-year-old boy. She just met him, yet he had grabbed her heart. Well, the chapter's a little long, so I broke it in two. And so next week we'll find out what other times or stories that Betty will tell Louie and see if she does any good with Louie. Thank you so much again for being part of Story Time. I love reading with you. I love your comments. Please feel free to leave any comments you'd like. You can pick up the book Betty off of Amazon.com, or the second book Ruth, or the third book Carol. Or you can go to my website, JoyceBennett-Hall.com. Until next week, have a great week, and Betty and I will return next Tuesday. Bye.